I, like most people, enjoy the output released by DreamWorks Animation. They're a studio full of creative people, and they produce their fair share of great films. I even did a video counting down my favorites. However, they've also made films I'm not particularly fond of, and I've decided to name those. Keep in mind, the only one of these I strongly dislike is the number one choice. The others I just find mediocre more than anything. So let's begin with my number 6 choice, The Boss Baby. It was after watching that film that I got the idea to make this list. This concept holds a lot of promise, as a short film. It's based on a picture book, and while other animated features like Clyde with a Chance of Meatballs and DreamWorks' own Shrek were able to expand on their source material in clever ways, The Boss Baby mostly relies on the typical baby jokes. So much of it hinges on the gag that Alec Baldwin is voicing a baby. And I guess that's somewhat amusing for about 5 minutes, but the story beats end up being fairly predictable, as is the sentimentality. There's also an odd inconsistency over how much is fantasy or whether the baby really is talking. The villain is fairly weak, and his plot is not particularly interesting. The animation is fantastic though. The most clever scenes involve these fantasy sequences that go into Tim's head, and the animators did a great job of emulating that UPA style, with a touch of Chuck Jones for good measure. But again, if this was a short, I would find more amusement here. They are currently making a sequel, so here's hoping they can improve, write stronger jokes, and make sure it relies on more than just the gag of Jack Donaghy as a baby. The Madagascar Trilogy. Okay, I'm cheating somewhat here, but these 3 films do sort of mesh together in my mind. The story of a group of animals escaping from the Central Park Zoo can be a funny one, but most of the gags are of the tired popular culture variety. Like, hey, remember the film American Beauty? Well, here's an American Beauty parody. Funny, right? I also find the animals aren't anything more than just the actors in animal clothing. So I don't see Alex the lion, I just hear Ben Stiller. I don't see Gloria the hippopotamus, I just hear Jada Pinkett Smith. The animation in the first Madagascar hasn't aged particularly well. I understand they were going for a more stylized look, and I admire that sort of experimentation in animation, but nowadays it looks like a PlayStation game. They definitely refined the animation for the sequels. Escape to Africa is just forgettable in my mind, though I disliked how they found the need to have Alex and Marty argue and split apart again. Madagascar 3 had some spirited action scenes, I will admit, but I was still left cold by these characters and I just cannot be charmed by them. Oddly enough, I do like the Penguins of Madagascar movie, mostly because I do think the penguins are easily the best part of the Madagascar trilogy. I know these films have a fan base, but I was never really a part of it. Ants. I watched Ants when it was originally released, and I remember enjoying it at the time. Revisiting it again recently, I don't think it holds up. While I shouldn't be too mean to the animation, as this was DreamWorks and PDI's first computer animated feature, the character designs really are unnerving and not pretty to look at. The story is fairly standard, and it's not difficult to make the comparison to other animated films that have told this sort of tale better. While I agree with its message of individuality being better than blindly following what everyone else is doing, Z is not an interesting enough lead to convey that idea. Woody Allen is surprisingly miscast here, and like with Madagascar, I cannot help but see the actors rather than any actual characters. Z and Princess Bala share little chemistry, and the villain is fairly boring too. There are some impressively mounted sequences, especially the ant-termite war. I almost wish the entire film was about that instead. Most people will compare Ants to A Bug's Life, but I think a more apt comparison is B-Movie. Also starring a famous Jewish comedian from New York as an insect wanting to break away from the rules of his society, this film is majorly helped by Jerry Seinfeld also writing the script. So the commentary is sharper and the comedy more in tune with his sensibilities. I think B-Movie is really funny, but when it comes to Ants, I'd rather stick with seeing Annie Hall or Manhattan again. Home. This is a film that seems like it might be cute with its adorable little aliens and playing with the idea of an alien invasion plot. However, then the characters open their mouths. A lot of the film hinges on the growing friendship between Tip and O, but there's a lack of any real connection there and not a whole lot of development on Tip's part. The aliens' manner of speaking is taken directly from the film's source material, The Meaning of Smekday. And while that might work fine in a book, it gets old rather quickly in a movie. The humor falls disappointingly flat most of the time, with a heavy reliance on toilet humor, right down to the cliched confusing a urinal cake for a mint gag. Rihanna feels like she's mainly stunt cast here, and it gets even more confusing when it has Tip listening to Rihanna songs. A lot of Home primarily consists of set pieces with Tip and O driving from one place to another. While the storyboard artists and character designers come up with some clever ideas here and there, and I also appreciate that Tip is an African-American lead, a rarity in a computer-animated film, I felt Home never rose above harmless and safe. Shrek the Third. The day this film was released was the moment Shrek went from being a beloved franchise to a joke. Even if the memes didn't really start until many years later, this third chapter just feels tired and searching for any plotline that'll work. The main storyline with Shrek searching for a new king doesn't leave much of an impact because Arthur is such a dull and whiny character. The whole sequence where Shrek ends up at a medieval high school is full of obvious jokes. Merlin serves no point, as does the whole subplot with Puss in Boots and Donkey switching bodies. It was watching that moment happen that I realized they had run out of actual ideas. The pop culture jokes and attempts at being hip are embarrassing, with none of the cleverness seen in the first two films. Prince Charming makes for a weak villain without the fairy godmother in tow, and even animation-wise, the backgrounds are surprisingly bare and empty. If there are some positives here, the Gingerbread Man does get some of the few funny scenes. The bit where he sees his life flash before his eyes left me howling both times I watched Shrek the Third. I also thought there were a couple of amusing moments with the princesses. Otherwise, this really is a sequel in search of a plot and jokes. Shrek the Third wasn't made because they had a great story, but rather because Shrek 2 was such a massive blockbuster. And my least favorite DreamWorks Animation movie is, you can say it with me, Shark Tale. This will forever be the low point for the studio. Well, this and Father of the Bride. They were hot off the success of Shrek and ready for anything. And while Shark Tale held promise with its Boy Who Cried Wolf story, but with fish, all that potential was overshadowed by the need to hire celebrities to voice fish who look like them and lame pop culture references and puns. There's little in the way of cleverness here, and it's a film that desperately wants to be hip. It even manages the impossible and makes Will Smith annoying rather than charming. Not even Wild Wild West accomplished that, and it's arguably a much worse film than Shark Tale. The main thing one remembers after viewing this film are the celebrity voices, and that the fish are designed to look like them. Who wants to see a fish version of Angelina Jolie? The characters are so simplistic, I have to pull up the IMDb page to remember what they're called. The one bright spot is Jack Black, the only actor in this who doesn't just resort to playing a variation of himself. And even then, I have to remember his character's name is... hold on, I got this. Lenny. Shark Tale is just not funny or enjoyable in my opinion. However, despite my list, I do prefer remembering the highlights of DreamWorks Animation's output. How to Train Your Dragon, Shrek, The Prince of Egypt, The Croods, the Aardman collaborations, and yes, even B-Movie. See you next time.